What are your reasons for wanting these pre-departure tests? What evidence are you basing it on?
Well, as we saw in the House of Commons yesterday, we're asking people to make changes to their everyday lives at the moment, and it's not reasonable to ask them to do that unless the government is doing everything it can to reduce the risk of this new variant, the Omicron variant, or indeed other variants from entering the country, because when people are bringing in the cases, they're seeding the cases in communities across the country, and it's right the government takes the immediate practical step of asking people to take a lateral flow test before they board a flight into the UK, because at the moment, the way the system works, you can travel to airports on busy public transit systems overseas, you can go through a busy airport, board a busy flight, arrive in busy arrivals and travel on busy transport home without having had a test, and that cannot be right, and we're calling on the government to take immediate action to tighten up arrangements at the border before people return to the UK or travel to the UK.
Wes, you will know better than I, but the public at the moment want to know the facts. We don't know the facts. We don't know how dangerous this variant is. And people are very wary of adjusting their daily lives on the basis of what may happen and on a worst-case scenario. When at the moment, as far as we know, this variant doesn't cause serious illness. It may be more transmissible, but it doesn't lead to further deaths. So it's a very fine balance. This is a very difficult call for the government to make.
And that's why I think taking the practical step of tightening health security at the border before people travel to the UK would be a sensible step. I think it's right to operate on a precautionary principle on that. But, you know, in terms of the measures at home, we still have the Delta variant, the vaccine is still at large, and there are things that the government can and should be doing to minimise the disruption to people's lives, livelihoods and liberties. So we support the efforts to get the booster rollout running full throttle. We'd called on the government to deliver 500,000 booster jabs a day. They've been falling well short of that. So we will fully get behind this campaign to get the booster rolled out. We want to make sure that in terms of the antiviral treatments for COVID-19, that those are evaluated and approved as quickly and safely as possible. So we've got another tool in our arsenal against COVID-19. We're calling on the government to take action on statutory sick pay so that people don't have a financial disincentive to staying at home. So there are lots of things the government can and should be doing, and with Christmas fast approaching, we want the government to do everything they can to make sure that people can enjoy Christmas as usual this year with their friends, with their families, going about their lives as normally as possible, because people have made lots of sacrifices over the last couple of years in terms of, you know, the risk to lives, livelihoods and liberties is still there, and we've got to do the right thing, and the government's got to do everything it can to minimise those risks.
Whereas it seems, though, that the only suggestion you've actually got different to what the government are already doing is to get people to take a lateral flow test, which we know isn't as robust as the PCR test, before they travel to come back.
It is, you're right, that we're calling on people to take lateral flow tests before travelling to the UK. I think that is a simple, practical, effective measure. But as I've just outlined, we are calling on the government to do more in other respects beyond the vaccine rollout. They could take action on statutory sick pay, for example, because there are lots of people who are supposed to isolate at home at the moment but simply feel they can't afford to. And if they're travelling around with the variant or indeed with the virus more generally going to work, they're putting other people at risk for no other reason. They feel they can't afford to stay at home. Action on that would be really helpful. In terms of the treatment of people with COVID, scientists are working really hard to develop these antiviral treatments. Government's got to speed up the evaluation and approval of those treatments, so we've got another tool. You know, the overall goal here is to make sure that we can coexist with this virus without having to impact on people's lives, livelihoods and liberties. That's the goal, and we will be able to do that if we've got effective vaccination rollout, if we've got effective treatment, and if we are taking sensible measures to prevent the development of new variants overseas and importing new variants from overseas too. So those are a range of things the government can do in addition. But we, you know, as we have been throughout the pandemic, we're trying to be constructive about this. We want the government to succeed in the vaccine rollout, and we want the country to succeed in terms of overcoming this virus and getting back to life as normal. We can do that if we work together, and that's why myself and Shadow Home Secretary Yvette Cooper have called on the government to take this step arrivals into the UK, which we think would make a real difference.
To be fair, we have had a very successful vaccine rollout, haven't we? And I'm just wondering, in your new role, you talk about being constructive. I mean, do you accept that Sajid Javid is doing a reasonable job, that it's a fine line that he treads at all times, and the messaging is as important as the actions at the moment, and that's where the difficulty is?
So with the vaccine rollout, I think everyone would agree, ourselves included, that the initial vaccine rollout was highly successful. My advice to Sajid Javid, who's also relatively new in his job as Health Secretary, so can look at things with a fresh pair of eyes without being precious about what's gone before. It did feel, to be honest, towards the end of Matt Hancock's tenure, that the government took the foot off the pedal a little bit on the vaccine rollout and rested too much on that initial success. There are still lots of people who haven't had a second jab or indeed even a first jab. And as I say, on the booster rollout, the government could and should be moving much faster. We called on them to do that. That's why when they announced their booster campaign this week, we said we'd get right behind it and support them. Having called on them to do something, we're not going to criticise them for taking advice and redoubling efforts on the booster rollout, and we will put our shoulders to the wheel to encourage people to volunteer as vaccine distributors, but also encourage people to take the booster jab too if they're eligible, and hopefully we all will be very soon.
Wes, we are in the build-up to Christmas. When we've got those party invitations, should we be accepting them?
I don't want people to change their Christmas plans, and if the government does everything that we've called on them to do, there should be absolutely no need. What I don't want to see is in a couple of weeks, just before Christmas, ministers traipsing into the House of Commons behind me with their tail between their legs saying, oh, we're really sorry, we didn't get a grip, we didn't do the things that you called on us to do, and we're going to introduce a whole new range of additional measures that would disrupt people's Christmases. We had a pretty miserable experience of that in the past. We don't want that to happen again. I want people to enjoy Christmas this year. I want people to have, making plans and enjoying themselves without having to worry. And if the government does everything within its power now, I think we can all look forward to Christmas. And goodness me, after the last couple of years we've had, we all deserve a good Christmas.
Well, I'm just wondering, will you be going to this Christmas party that Sir Keir Starmer, he's issued an invitation alongside Rachel Reeves, the Shadow Chancellor? Interestingly, the Deputy Leader, Angela Rayner, not mentioned on the invitation.
Oh, I'm sure she'll be there, or she's probably got another commitment, I don't know. I've not been invited, by the way, so if you're watching, Keir and Rachel, I'll be having words with you later. No, these are drinks for journalists that Keir and Rachel have organised. As I say, we want people to enjoy Christmas, to be able to get together as usual, and I hope the government will do everything that they can to make sure that that happens, and we all deserve a very Merry Christmas, including journalists.
Oh, I say, you are being charitable. I mean, you know more about the NHS than most because you've recovered from kidney cancer recently. I mean, are you fully well now?
I am. Thanks for asking, and that's a really important news story out today as well. The National Audit Office has warned about the state of cancer waits and treatment times in our country. We've got NHS waiting lists at record highs of almost 6 million now. And what worries me is that they're set to increase further and waiting times are set to get even longer. And in terms of my own experience with kidney cancer, the only reason it was picked up was for a routine scan for kidney stones. And so within that big NHS backlog, which will be for a whole range of important treatments to help people go about their lives as healthily and happily as possible, will undoubtedly be some undetected cancer cases. So we're calling on the government to publish their plan for elective care, to bring down waiting times, to improve treatment times. And for cancer, I know better than most that timing is everything, and I'm really worried that we've got waiting lists rocketing and cancer treatment delays, and I hope the government will treat that with the priority it deserves.
Wes Streeting, thank you very much for joining us this morning. Many congratulations on the new role.